The cold concrete beneath my back suddenly felt like ice, seeping through my work shirt and chilling me to the bone. I know we said we'd keep it professional, but God, I miss you. The words twisted in my gut like a rusty knife. I'd been married to Sandra for 12 years, together for 15. We had a 17-year-old daughter, Emily, who was probably upstairs right now doing homework, completely oblivious to the fact that her mother was planning to blow up our family. I heard the kitchen door open and close, followed by the familiar click of Sandra's heels on our hardwood floors. She was probably heading upstairs to shower and get ready for whatever she had planned with Tom. The same Tom who'd cheated on her 6 years ago, leading to their messy divorce. The same Tom she'd sworn she never wanted to see again. Rolling out from under the Mustang, I wiped my hands on an old rag and tried to process what I'd just heard. My reflection stared back at me from the chrome bumper, 44 years old, greying at the temples, wearing the same oil-stained work clothes I'd had on for the past 3 days. When had I become this guy? When had I become invisible in my own marriage? I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. Sandra was standing in front of our walk-in closet, holding up a black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, a dress she'd never worn for me. "Hey babe," she said without turning around. "How's the Mustang coming along?" "Fine." I watched her in the mirror as she held the dress against her body. "Who was that on the phone?" "Oh, just Tom. We're having dinner Friday night to discuss some business stuff." "Business stuff?" "Right. Tom worked in commercial real estate, while Sandra was a VP of marketing at TechFlow Solutions, a rising software company downtown. What possible business could they have together?" "Cancel it," I said, the words coming out harder than I'd intended. Sandra finally turned around, her green eyes flashing with annoyance. "Excuse me?" I said cancel it. I'm not comfortable with you having dinner with your ex-husband. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jake, don't be ridiculous. It's just dinner. Besides, it's impossible to cancel now. I already confirmed." Impossible to cancel. Those 4 words would echo in my head for the next week, growing louder and more bitter each time I replayed them. "Nothing's impossible to cancel, Sandra. You pick up the phone and say you can't make it. Look, I know you're feeling insecure lately with the business struggling and everything, but you can't take that out on me." She turned back to the closet, dismissing me like I was one of Emily's teenage friends asking for a ride to the mall. The business. My classic car restoration shop had been hemorrhaging money for the past 6 months. Sandra never let me forget it, especially when her own career was soaring. She'd gotten 2 promotions in the last year and was now pulling in twice what I made on a good month. "This isn't about the business." "Isn't it?" She pulled out a pair of heels, the expensive ones I'd bought her for Christmas. "Jake, you've been moody and distant for months. Maybe if you put half as much effort into our marriage as you do into those old cars, we wouldn't be having this conversation." I stared at her, this woman I'd loved since I was 29, and realized I was looking at a stranger. When had she become so cold? When had every conversation become a battle where she held all the weapons? "Fine," I said. "Have your dinner." But as I walked back down to the garage, my mind was already working. Sandra thought I was just some grease monkey who spent his days with his head buried under car hoods, too stupid to see what was happening in his own house. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I'd grown up in this town, gone to school with half the people who now ran the local businesses. I knew every mechanic, every tow truck driver, every guy who worked at the impound lot. More importantly, I knew how to pay attention to details, a skill that had served me well in restoring classic cars and was about to serve me even better in uncovering my wife's lies. The next morning, while Sandra was at work and Emily was at school, I drove to my buddy Ray's boxing gym downtown. Ray Kowalski had been my best friend since high school, a former Golden Gloves boxer who now trained kids and middle-aged guys like me who needed somewhere to work out their frustrations. "You look like hell," Ray said as I walked through the door. The gym smelled like sweat and leather, familiar and comforting. "Feel like it too." I started wrapping my hands, preparing to take my anger out on the heavy bag. Sandra again. Ray was the only person who knew how bad things had gotten at home. He'd watched me go from the confident guy who'd married the prettiest girl in town to whatever I'd become now. She's having dinner with her ex-husband Friday night. Says it's business. Ray stopped adjusting the speed bag and turned to look at me. Tom Morrison, the real estate guy. You know him? Know of him. My cousin Danny does electrical work for his company. Says Tom's been bragging around town about reconnecting with an old flame. Married woman, high-powered job. The words hit me like a physical blow. So it wasn't just my imagination. Tom was actually bragging about his affair with my wife to contractors around town. How long before everyone knew? How long before I became the laughing stock of every bar and coffee shop in the city? What are you going to do about it? Ray asked. I slammed my fist into the heavy bag, feeling the impact reverberate up my arm. I don't know yet, but I'm not going to just sit there and take it. Good. You've been taking it for too long already. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I drove to the electronics store and bought a small GPS tracker, the kind worried parents use to keep tabs on their teenagers. It was perfectly legal to track a vehicle I co-owned, and Sandra's car was in both our names. Installing it took less than 5 minutes. I attached it to the underside of her BMW, hidden behind the rear bumper where she'd never think to look. If Sandra was lying about where she was going, I'd know about it. Friday evening arrived like an end sentence. Sandra spent 2 hours getting ready, longer than she'd spent preparing for our wedding. She wore the black dress, the expensive heels, and perfume I hadn't smelled in months. Don't wait up, she said, kissing my cheek like we were roommates instead of husband and wife. Where are you going again? Marcello's. That new Italian place downtown. Another lie. I'd already checked. Tom had made reservations at the Grandview Hotel's restaurant, one of the most expensive places in the city. The same hotel where he kept a suite for out-of-town clients, or apparently for screwing other men's wives. I waited 30 minutes after Sandra left, then checked the GPS tracker on my phone. Sure enough, she was at the Grandview, not Marcello's. I grabbed my keys and headed downtown, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and anticipation. The Grandview Hotel sat in the heart of our city's business district, all glass and steel and pretentious modern art. I parked across the street and walked into the lobby, trying to look like I belonged there despite my jeans and work boots, and there they were. Sandra and Tom sat at a corner table in the hotel's dimly lit restaurant, leaning toward each other like teenagers on a first date. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting on his arm, in a gesture so intimate it made my stomach turn. Tom Morrison looked exactly like the kind of man Sandra had always claimed she didn't want. Smooth, polished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He was 46, 3 years older than me, with the kind of silver hair that looked distinguished instead of just old. Everything about him screamed success, from his Rolex to his perfectly straight teeth. I watched them for 10 minutes, hidden behind a marble pillar near the hotel's entrance. They weren't discussing business. Tom's hand was on Sandra's thigh. She was feeding him bites of her dessert. When he whispered something in her ear, she blushed like a schoolgirl. My phone buzzed with a text message. From Sandra. Dinner running long. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. The words felt like acid in my throat. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The lighting wasn't great, but it was good enough to clearly show my wife on what was obviously a romantic date with another man. Tom leaned over and kissed her neck, and Sandra's eyes fluttered closed in a way that told me this wasn't their first time together. How long had this been going on? How many business dinners and late meetings had actually been secret rendezvous with her ex-husband? They finished their meal and headed toward the elevators. I followed at a distance, watching as they got into the elevator together. The display showed it stopping at the 14th floor. the same floor where Tom kept his corporate suite. I'd seen enough. Walking back to my truck, I noticed Tom's black Mercedes parked in the hotel's valet area. A plan began forming in my mind, petty maybe, but satisfying. I walked over to his car and pulled out my pocket knife, letting the air out of all 4 tires. Not slashing them, which would be vandalism, just deflating them. Then I tucked a note under his windshield wiper. Impossible to cancel? Think again. The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Emily was in her room when I got back, probably on FaceTime with her friends or working on homework. She had no idea that her world was about to implode. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the photos on my phone and trying to figure out my next move. Part of me wanted to drive back to the hotel and confront them both. Part of me wanted to pack my bags and disappear. But a larger part of me, the part that had been slowly building over months of condescension and dismissal, wanted revenge. Sandra came home at 2:30 a.m., slipping into bed like nothing had happened. She smelled like Tom's cologne and intimacy, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying something that would give away what I knew. "How was dinner?" I asked in the darkness. "Fine. Boring business stuff, mostly." Another lie to add to the growing pile. The next morning, I called my sister Linda. She worked as a realtor here in town and knew everyone's business. If I was going to wage war, I needed intelligence. "Jake, it's barely 8 o'clock on a Saturday. What's wrong?" "I need you to tell me what you know about Tom Morrison." There was a pause. "Tom Morrison, Sandra's ex. Why?" "Just tell me what you know." Linda sighed. "Well, he's been making the rounds lately, showing up at all the networking events, buying drinks for everyone, acting like he's some big shot. Word is his real estate company is struggling. Too much overhead, not enough sales. His wife Jennifer caught him texting some woman a few weeks ago, and they had a huge fight at the country club." "Why are you asking?" "Jennifer, Tom's wife. I'd forgotten he'd remarried after his divorce from Sandra. A plan began forming in my mind. Can you get me Jennifer's phone number?" "Jake, what are you planning?" "Nothing illegal. I just need to make a phone call." Linda was quiet for a moment. "Tom Morrison is bad news, Jake. Always has been. If Sandra's mixed up with him again..." "She is." "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. What do you need me to do?" That's what I loved about my sister. No judgment, no lectures, just immediate loyalty. "Get me Jennifer's number, and maybe start paying attention to what people are saying around town about Tom and his mystery woman." "Already on it. I'll call you back in an hour." I spent that hour in my garage, pretending to work on the Mustang while my mind raced through possibilities. Sandra thought she was so smart, so careful. She had no idea that her husband grew up in this town, that I had connections everywhere, that I knew how to fight dirty when I had to. My phone rang right on schedule. "Jennifer Morrison," Linda said, "and Jake, be careful. Jennifer's got a reputation for being intense." Perfect. Intense was exactly what I needed. I waited until Monday morning, when I knew Sandra would be in her weekly staff meeting, before making the call. "Jennifer Morrison." Her voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of irritation. She sounded like the kind of woman who didn't tolerate fools. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Jake Sullivan. I think we need to talk about our spouses." Silence. "I'm sorry, who is this?" "Jake Sullivan. I'm married to Sandra, your husband's ex-wife. I believe they've been seeing each other behind both our backs." Another pause, longer this time. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Sullivan?" "I'm suggesting that your husband took my wife to dinner at the Grandview Hotel Friday night, then up to his corporate suite. I have photos if you're interested." The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. "Send them to me," she said finally, and rattled off an email address. "If what you're saying is true, then we definitely need to talk." I sent the photos immediately, along with screenshots of the GPS data showing Sandra's car at the hotel. My phone rang 5 minutes later. "When can you meet?" Jennifer asked, and her voice was ice cold. We agreed to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, far from anywhere Sandra or Tom might see us. I arrived early and claimed a corner table, watching the door until Jennifer walked in. She was nothing like Sandra. Where my wife was soft and curvy, Jennifer was all sharp angles and controlled energy. She wore a navy business suit that probably cost more than my truck, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Everything about her screamed power and control. "Mr. Sullivan." She sat down across from me without offering to shake hands. "Thank you for meeting with me." "Don't thank me yet. Show me what you have." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos, watching her face for any reaction. She studied each image carefully, her expression never changing. "How long has this been going on?" she asked finally. "I'm not sure. I just found out Friday night." "Well, I can tell you it's been at least 6 weeks. That's when Tom started working late and taking mysterious phone calls." She looked up from the phone. "What do you want to do about it?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected tears, or anger, or denial. Instead, Jennifer was treating this like a business problem that needed solving. "I want them to pay," I said. For the first time since she'd sat down, Jennifer smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Good, so do I." Jennifer Morrison was exactly the kind of ally I needed. Smart, ruthless, and completely without sentiment when it came to getting revenge. Over the next hour, she laid out everything she knew about Tom's recent behavior, and I shared what I'd observed about Sandra's lies and deception. "Tom's been sloppy," Jennifer said, sipping her coffee like we were discussing the weather instead of planning to destroy our cheating spouses. "He thinks I'm too busy with my own career to notice his affairs. This isn't his first, by the way." "What do you mean?" "There was a secretary 2 years ago, and a client last summer. I let those slide because they didn't threaten me directly. But Sandra—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sandra is different. Tom's always carried a torch for her. She's the one that got away, his great lost love. If I don't stop this now, he'll leave me for her." The clinical way she discussed her husband's infidelity was unsettling, but I needed her help. "What did you have in mind?" Jennifer pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "Tom's been using his company credit card for their dates, expensive dinners, hotel rooms, even jewelry. I have access to all his accounts through our joint financial advisor. That's helpful, but I need more than financial records." "Oh, I have more." Her smile turned predatory. "Tom's been forwarding Sandra's messages to his personal email account, the one he thinks I don't know about. I've been reading every word they've written to each other for the past month." She showed me printouts of email exchanges between Sandra and Tom that made my stomach turn. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. Sandra had written about leaving me once Emily graduated high school. Tom had responded with promises about divorcing Jennifer and starting fresh with his soulmate. "Jesus," I muttered, scanning through the messages. "She's been planning this for months." "They both have. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" I looked up from the emails, meeting Jennifer's cold blue eyes. "I want to humiliate them, both of them. I want everyone in this town to know exactly what kind of people they are." "Public humiliation." Jennifer nodded approvingly. "I like it, but we need to be smart about this. One mistake, and we look like the bitter, vindictive ex-spouses." Over the next week, Jennifer and I met twice more to plan our strategy. She was incredibly thorough, approaching our revenge plot like a military campaign. We identified key targets, people whose opinions mattered to Sandra and Tom, whose judgment would hurt them the most. For Sandra, that meant her colleagues at TechFlow Solutions, particularly her boss David Chen, and the other VPs she competed with for the next promotion. It also meant the social circle she'd cultivated since moving up in the company. The wine club, the charity board, the networking groups where she'd built her reputation as a successful, family-oriented professional. For Tom, it meant his business associates, his clients, and the country club crowd, where he'd spent years building his image as a successful family man. The key is timing, Jennifer explained during our third meeting. We can't just dump everything at once. We need to create a narrative, let the story build naturally. What kind of narrative? The kind where they're not just cheaters, but liars and hypocrites who've been deceiving everyone around them. Meanwhile, I was dealing with the daily torture of living with Sandra while knowing the truth. She continued her charade of the loving wife, kissing me goodbye in the mornings, and asking about my day when she came home. But I noticed things I'd missed before, how she guarded her phone, how she found excuses to work late or meet clients for dinner, how she'd started buying new lingerie that I never saw. The worst part was watching Emily, who was completely oblivious to what was happening. She was a senior in high school, stressed about college applications, and worried about normal teenage things. She had no idea that her mother was planning to abandon our family. "Dad, are you okay?" Emily asked one evening while we were eating dinner. Sandra was at another business meeting. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Why?" "You've been weird lately, quiet and angry all the time." I looked at my daughter, 17 years old, with Sandra's green eyes and my stubborn chin, and felt my heart break a little more. She deserved better than this. She deserved parents who kept their promises and honored their commitments. "Just work stress," I lied. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Emily was too smart to buy that completely. She kept watching me with concerned eyes, and I realized that Sandra's betrayal wasn't just destroying our marriage, it was affecting our daughter too. That's when I decided to accelerate the timeline. The next Friday, I knew Sandra was planning another dinner meeting with Tom. Instead of following them or stewing at home, I decided to make my first public move. I drove to Murphy's Pub, the local bar, where half the guys I'd grown up with still gathered on Friday nights. It was the kind of place where news traveled fast and gossip was currency. Jake Sullivan, Danny Kowalski, Ray's younger brother, waved me over to the bar. "Haven't seen you here in months." "Been busy with work," I said, ordering a beer. "How's the electrical business?" "Can't complain. Just finished a big job for Tom Morrison's real estate company. That guy's a piece of work." Perfect opening. "How so?" Danny leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Guy's been bragging about screwing some married woman. Says she's going to leave her husband for him. Real classy, right?" I took a sip of my beer, keeping my expression neutral. "Sounds like a real winner." "Yeah, well, karma hits hard. His wife's already suspicious. Caught him deleting text messages last week. Won't be long before she figures it out." "What's the married woman story? She got kids?" "That's the worst part. Guy says she's got a teenage daughter, but she's willing to blow up her whole family for him. What kind of mother does that?" I finished my beer and left, satisfied that the seeds of gossip were already planted. By next week, half the guys in town would be talking about Tom Morrison and his married girlfriend. It wouldn't take long for someone to put the pieces together. But gossip wasn't enough. I needed something bigger, something that would force Sandra and Tom to face consequences for their actions. That's when I remembered Sandra's company picnic. TechFlow Solutions held an annual employee appreciation event every October, complete with families, games, and speeches from the executive team. Sandra had been talking about it for weeks, excited because she was supposed to give a presentation about work-life balance and professional success. Work-life balance. The irony was almost too perfect. I called Jennifer. "I have an idea," I said, "but I'm going to need your help, and it's going to require perfect timing." "I'm listening." I outlined my plan, watching Jennifer's smile grow wider with each detail. "That's diabolical," she said when I finished. "I love it." The TechFlow picnic was scheduled for the following Saturday at Riverside Park. Sandra spent the entire week preparing her presentation, practicing her speech about maintaining healthy relationships while pursuing career success. Every word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "You're coming, right?" she asked Thursday night. It would mean a lot to have you and Emily there. Wouldn't miss it, I said, and meant every word. Friday night, Sandra announced she was going out for drinks with her colleagues to celebrate the upcoming picnic. Another lie. I knew she was meeting Tom at their usual hotel. But this time, I didn't follow them. I had bigger plans for tomorrow. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for a company picnic and public humiliation. Sandra spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing an outfit that struck the right balance between professional and approachable. She looked beautiful, and for a moment I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 15 years ago. Then I remembered the emails Jennifer had shown me, the ones where Sandra called me boring and emotionally distant, where she wrote about how much happier she was with Tom. "Ready?" Sandra asked, checking her appearance one final time. "Ready," I said. Emily rode with us to the park, chattering about her college applications and weekend plans. She was excited about the picnic, looking forward to meeting Sandra's colleagues and seeing where her mother worked. She had no idea she was about to witness the destruction of our family. The picnic was already in full swing when we arrived. TechFlow had rented the entire pavilion area, complete with catered food, games, and a small stage for presentations. Sandra immediately went into networking mode, introducing me and Emily to her colleagues and making small talk about quarterly reports and client acquisitions. I played the part of the supportive husband, smiling and shaking hands and pretending to care about software development and marketing strategies. But I was really scanning the crowd, looking for Jennifer and waiting for the signal. I found her near the dessert table, wearing casual clothes and sunglasses, completely unrecognizable from the power-suited woman I'd been meeting with. She gave me an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was in place. The presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m., right after lunch, when everyone would be gathered around the pavilion. Sandra had been nervous all morning, constantly checking her notes and practicing her opening lines. She had no idea that her carefully planned speech about work-life balance was about to become the most ironic moment of her career. "Ladies and gentlemen," David Chen, Sandra's boss, stepped up to the microphone. "I'd like to introduce one of our most valuable team members, Sandra Sullivan, who's going to talk to us about maintaining healthy relationships while building professional success." The crowd applauded politely as Sandra took the stage. She looked confident and poised, every inch the successful executive she'd worked so hard to become. "Thank you, David. When I think about work-life balance, I think about the importance of honesty and communication in all our relationships." I almost choked on my drink. Honesty and communication, from a woman who'd been lying to her husband and daughter for months. Sandra continued her presentation, talking about trust and commitment, and the value of building strong foundations, both at work and at home. Every word felt like a personal insult, a reminder of how completely she'd betrayed everything she was now preaching about. "The key to any successful relationship is transparency," she said, clicking to her next slide. "When we're honest with the people we care about, we create an environment of mutual respect and—" That's when Jennifer stepped forward. She'd positioned herself near the front of the crowd, close enough to be clearly visible, but far enough away to avoid immediate recognition. As Sandra continued talking about transparency and honesty, Jennifer pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. Not of Sandra, but of the crowd's reaction to what was about to happen. I checked my watch. 2:15 p.m., exactly as we'd planned. I pulled out my own phone and opened the email I'd prepared the night before, an email containing screenshots of Sandra and Tom's most damning conversations, along with the photos I'd taken at the Grandview Hotel. The recipient list included every TechFlow employee whose email address I'd been able to find, along with several members of the local business community and social organizations Sandra belonged to. I hit send. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Sandra continued her presentation, talking about the importance of keeping promises and maintaining integrity. Then I started seeing people checking their phones, their expressions changing from polite attention to shock and confusion. David Chen looked at his phone and went pale. Several other executives started whispering among themselves. In the audience, people were showing their screens to their neighbors, creating a ripple effect of gasps and murmurs. Sandra noticed the distraction, but kept going, assuming people were just being rude with their phones. She had no idea that everyone in the audience was currently reading explicit messages between her and her ex-husband, along with photographic evidence of their affair. As I was saying, Sandra continued, raising her voice slightly, trust is the foundation of every healthy relationship. When we break that trust, we damage not just ourselves but everyone around us. Sandra, David Chen's voice cut through her presentation. Sandra, I think you need to see this. He held up his phone, showing her the email that had just gone out to the entire company. Sandra's face went from confusion to horror as she realized what she was looking at. I can explain, but there was no explanation that would work. The evidence was overwhelming. Months of messages planning their affair, photos of them together at the hotel, even financial records Jennifer had provided showing Tom's company credit card being used for their dates. The crowd was buzzing now, everyone talking at once. I saw Emily near the food table, looking confused and frightened as she overheard fragments of conversation about her mother and Tom Morrison. Sandra, David said again, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet pavilion. I think you should step down. Sandra looked out at the crowd, seeing the judgment in their faces, the whispers and pointed fingers. Her carefully constructed image as a successful, family-oriented professional was crumbling in real time. That's when she saw me. Our eyes met across the pavilion, and I saw the moment she realized what had happened. The betrayal, the shock, the dawning understanding that her boring, grease-monkey husband had just destroyed her career and reputation in front of everyone who mattered to her. Jake, she whispered into the microphone, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. I stood up slowly, making sure everyone could see me. Hello, Sandra. Great presentation. Very inspiring stuff about honesty and trust. The sarcasm in my voice was unmistakable, and several people in the crowd actually gasped. Sandra's face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. You bastard, she said, forgetting that the microphone was still live. You vindictive, pathetic bastard. Pathetic? I walked toward the stage, feeling the crowd's attention focused on me. I'm not the one who's been lying to my family for months. I'm not the one who's been planning to abandon my teenage daughter for my ex-husband. Sandra, please step away from the microphone, David Chen said, but Sandra was beyond caring about professional protocol now. You had no right, she screamed. This is my career, my life. And what about my life? What about Emily's life? Did we factor into your plans at all, or were we just obstacles to your happiness? Emily. I suddenly remembered my daughter was here, watching her parents destroy each other in front of a crowd of strangers. I looked around frantically and saw her running toward the parking lot, tears streaming down her face. Emily, I called after her, but she was already gone. Sandra saw her too, and the fight seemed to go out of her. She stepped back from the microphone, her face pale and shaken. Ladies and gentlemen, David Chen said, taking control of the situation, I think we should call it a day. Thank you all for coming. The crowd began to disperse, but I could hear the conversation starting, the gossip that would spread through the entire business community within hours. Sandra's reputation was finished, and probably her career at TechFlow as well. Jennifer appeared at my elbow, no longer bothering to hide her identity. Phase 1 complete, she said quietly. How do you feel? I watched Sandra stumble off the stage, alone and humiliated, and realized I felt empty. The revenge I'd planned so carefully, the public humiliation I'd orchestrated, it had worked perfectly, but it hadn't given me the satisfaction I'd expected. I need to find my daughter, I said. I found Emily in my truck, sobbing into her hands. She looked up when I opened the driver's door, her eyes red and accusatory. "How could you do that to her?" she demanded. "In front of all those people?" "Emily, you don't understand." "I understand that Mum was cheating on you. I'm not stupid, Dad. I've known something was wrong for weeks. But did you have to humiliate her like that? Did you have to destroy her in public?" I sat in the driver's seat, suddenly feeling every one of my 44 years. "She made her choice, Em. She chose Tom over our family." "So you chose revenge over your family? How are you any better?" The question hit me like a physical blow. How was I any better? I just destroyed my wife's career and reputation in front of our daughter, traumatizing Emily in the process. I'd gotten my revenge, but at what cost? "I'm sorry you had to see that," I said finally. "Are you getting divorced?" The question I'd been avoiding for weeks, spoken by my 17-year-old daughter in the parking lot of a public park. "I don't know. Probably." Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Can I stay with Aunt Linda for a while? I can't be around you and Mum right now." "Of course, whatever you need." I drove Emily to Linda's house in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. When I dropped her off, she hugged me briefly, the first physical affection she'd shown me in weeks. "I love you, Dad, but what you did today, that wasn't you. That was someone else, someone angry and mean. I hope you find a way back to being yourself." I drove home alone, wondering if I'd won or lost the war I'd started. The house felt like a tomb when I walked through the front door. Sandra's car wasn't in the driveway, and I had no idea where she'd gone after the disaster at the company picnic. Part of me hoped she'd driven straight to Tom's place. At least then, she'd be consistent in her choices. I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and sat in my kitchen, staring at the same table where I'd overheard her making plans with Tom just 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. It felt like a lifetime. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Phase 1 successful. Tom's having his own crisis at home. Ready for Phase 2? Phase 2. Right, because destroying my wife's career and traumatizing my daughter apparently wasn't enough. I'd signed up for total war, and Jennifer wasn't the type to accept partial victory. I was about to respond when I heard Sandra's car in the driveway. The front door opened and closed, followed by the sound of her heels on the hardwood floor. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I was shocked by how different she looked. Gone was the polished, confident executive who'd taken the stage 3 hours ago. This Sandra had mascara streaks down her cheeks, her hair was disheveled, and her hands were shaking. "Where's Emily?" she asked. "Linda's house. She needed some space." Sandra nodded, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. "David fired me. Effective immediately. Said I'd violated the company's ethics policy and created a hostile work environment." I took a sip of my beer, trying to process how I felt about that news. Part of me was satisfied. Sandra had destroyed our marriage, so it seemed fair that her career should suffer too. But another part of me, the part that had loved this woman for 15 years, felt sick about what I'd done. "I'm sorry," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. "No, you're not." Sandra sat down across from me, her voice hollow. "You planned this perfectly. The timing, the audience, even making sure all my colleagues and friends got copies of those messages. This was calculated revenge, Jake. Don't pretend you're sorry about it." She was right, of course. I had planned it perfectly, with Jennifer's help. We'd identified Sandra's vulnerabilities and exploited them ruthlessly. "You chose this," I said. "Every lie, every secret meeting, every message you sent to Tom, you chose all of it." "I know." The admission seemed to deflate her further. "I know I did this to myself, but Jake, the way you destroyed me today, in front of all those people, I never thought you were capable of that kind of cruelty." Neither did I, if I was being honest. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been planning to leave me for Tom?" Sandra was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "Since June. He reached out after his company started working with some of my clients. At first, it really was just business, but then you remembered why you married him the first time. It wasn't like that. Tom and I, we have history. We understand each other in ways that I don't understand you. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. We grew apart, Jake. You have to admit that. When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time we talked about anything besides Emily's school or your business problems or my work schedule? She wasn't wrong. We'd been living like roommates for months, maybe even years, but that didn't justify what she'd done. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to have an affair. I decided to feel alive again. Do you know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage? To feel like your husband sees you as just another obligation to manage? The words stung because there was truth in them. I had been taking Sandra for granted, treating our marriage like a piece of machinery that would keep running as long as I didn't break it completely. But you were planning to leave, I said. Those emails Jennifer showed me. You and Tom were talking about divorcing us and starting over. Sandra's face went pale. Jennifer showed you our emails. How did she? She's been reading Tom's messages for weeks. Did you really think you could have an affair with a married man and his wife wouldn't find out? Oh, God. Sandra put her head in her hands. Tom said Jennifer was too busy with her own career to pay attention to what he was doing. Tom lied to you, just like you lied to me. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of our destroyed marriage settling between us like a physical presence. What happens now? Sandra asked finally. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen. I should take this, I said, stepping into the living room. Jake, we have a problem, Jennifer said without preamble. Tom's gone. What do you mean, gone? I mean he packed a bag and left, cleaned out our joint checking account and disappeared. I think he's panicked about the exposure and decided to cut his losses. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. When? About an hour ago, right after I confronted him with the emails and photos. He said he wasn't going to stick around to be humiliated like Sandra was. Did he say where he was going? No, but Jake, I think he might try to contact Sandra. In his mind, she's probably the only ally he has left. I looked back toward the kitchen, where Sandra was still sitting at the table with her head in her hands. I'll handle it, I said. Be careful. Tom's not stable right now. He's lost his wife, his reputation, and probably his business. Men like that can be dangerous when they're cornered. I hung up and returned to the kitchen. Sandra looked up when I entered, her eyes red and swollen. That was Jennifer, I said. Tom's gone. Took off with their joint savings and disappeared. Sandra's face went through several emotions, surprise, hurt, and finally understanding. He left me, she said quietly, just like he did 6 years ago. The first sign of real trouble and he runs. Sandra, Jennifer thinks he might try to contact you. If he does, he won't. Her voice was bitter now. Tom Morrison doesn't fight for anything, Jake. He takes what he wants until it becomes inconvenient. Then he moves on. I was just too stupid to remember that. My phone buzzed with a text message. From Tom. Tell Sandra I'm sorry. This got too complicated. I showed Sandra the message, watching her face crumble as she read it. 15 years, she whispered. I threw away 15 years of marriage for a man who won't even face the consequences of his own actions. I sat back down across from her, feeling the anger that had sustained me for the past 2 weeks beginning to fade. Sandra looked broken, abandoned by the man she'd sacrificed everything for, facing the ruins of her career and family. I'm sorry, she said, looking directly at me for the first time since she'd come home. I'm sorry for all of it, the lies, the affair, the way I treated you and Emily. You didn't deserve any of this. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, but it felt hollow now. Too little, too late, spoken only after she'd lost everything. I know you are, I said, but I don't know if sorry is enough. Sandra nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I need you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt Emily. But you did. You hurt all of us. I know. We sat in silence again. Two people who'd once loved each other enough to build a life together, now strangers in the ruins of that life. I should pack some things, Sandra said finally. Stay at a hotel until I figure out what comes next. You don't have to leave tonight. Yes, I do. Emily's not coming home as long as I'm here, and she needs her father right now. She needs at least one parent who hasn't completely failed her. Sandra stood up and headed toward the stairs, then paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, Jake, what you did today, it was brilliant. Cruel, but brilliant. I never saw it coming. I had help. Jennifer. She must really hate Tom to team up with you like that. She hates losing more than she hates Tom, and you and Tom made her look like a fool. Sandra nodded slowly. Well, she got her revenge. We both did. After Sandra left for her hotel, I called Emily at Linda's house. Dad? Her voice was small and tired. Hey, sweetheart, Mom's gone. She's staying at a hotel for a while. You can come home whenever you're ready. Is it over? The fighting and the revenge and all of it? I looked around my empty house, thinking about Tom's disappearance and Sandra's destroyed career and the gossip that would follow our family for months. I think so, I said. I think it's over. But I was wrong. Emily came home Sunday evening, carrying a small overnight bag and wearing the same expression she'd had as a little girl when she was trying to figure out if she was in trouble. We ordered pizza and watched a movie, both of us pretending that everything was normal while carefully avoiding any mention of the previous day's events. Are you and Mum getting divorced? She asked during a commercial break. Probably. Is that okay with you? Emily was quiet for a moment, picking pepperoni off her pizza slice. I think so. You guys have been miserable for months. Maybe you'll both be happier apart. The casual way she said it broke my heart a little. When had my 17-year-old daughter become so wise about the failure of adult relationships? I'm sorry you had to see what happened yesterday. That wasn't how I wanted you to find out about your mother and Tom. I already knew, Dad. Not the details, but I knew something was going on. Mum's been different for weeks. Happier, but also sneakier. And you've been angry all the time. You knew? I'm not blind. Mum started buying new clothes, working late all the time, always checking her phone, and you started looking at her like you didn't trust her. Emily shrugged. I just didn't know what to do about it. I felt another wave of guilt wash over me. While I'd been focused on my own pain and planning my revenge, I'd forgotten that Emily was watching everything, trying to navigate her parents' failing marriage while dealing with her senior year of high school. I should have handled it better, I said. Maybe, but Mum should have been honest from the beginning. If she wanted a divorce, she should have just asked for one instead of cheating. Monday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Jake, it's Jennifer. We need to meet. Something's happened. Her voice was tense, more urgent than I'd ever heard it. What kind of something? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the coffee shop in an hour? I found Jennifer already waiting when I arrived, her usual composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled anxiety. She was clutching her phone like a lifeline. Tom's back, she said without preamble. Back? I thought he'd left town. He did, but he came back last night, and Jake, he's lost it, completely lost it. She showed me her phone, displaying a series of increasingly erratic text messages from her husband. This is all your fault. You and that mechanic destroyed everything. I'm not going down alone. If I'm ruined, everyone's ruined. You think you're so smart, but I have information that will destroy all of you. What information? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Tom's been recording conversations, phone calls, meetings, even some of our planning sessions. He's threatening to release them unless we back off. My blood ran cold. What kind of recordings? Jennifer pulled out a small digital device. He left this on my doorstep this morning with a note. Listen. She pressed play, and I heard my own voice coming through the tiny speaker. I want to humiliate them, both of them. I want everyone in this town to know exactly what kind of people they are. Then Jennifer's voice. Public humiliation. I like it, but we need to be smart about this. The recording continued for several more minutes, capturing our entire conversation about planning Sandra's downfall at the company picnic. It was damning evidence of premeditated revenge, the kind of thing that could destroy both our reputations if it became public. How long has he been recording us? I don't know. Maybe weeks. Tom's always been paranoid about business deals. He records everything. I should have thought about it. What does he want? Jennifer showed me another message. Meet me at the Grandview Hotel tonight at 8 p.m. Both of you. Come alone, and maybe we can work something out. It's a trap, I said immediately. Of course it's a trap. But what choice do we have? If those recordings become public, we'll both be destroyed. Your business, my career, our reputations, everything. I thought about Emily, about how she'd already lost respect for both her parents. If these recordings came out, showing how I'd coldly planned to destroy her mother, it would finish whatever relationship we had left. There has to be another way. Like what? Tom holds all the cards now. We either meet with him, or he releases those recordings and ruins us all. I stared at the digital recorder, thinking about how quickly the tables had turned. A week ago, I'd felt powerful, in control, getting the revenge I deserved. Now I was being blackmailed by the same man whose marriage I'd helped destroy. What do you think he wants? Money, probably. Or maybe he wants us to publicly recant everything, admit that we made it all up. But we didn't make it up. Sandra and Tom really were having an affair. That won't matter if he can prove we conspired to destroy them. The truth becomes irrelevant if our methods were unethical. I spent the rest of the day trying to figure out a way around Tom's trap, but every option seemed to lead to disaster. If I didn't show up, he'd release the recordings. If I did show up, he'd probably try to extort money or favors from me indefinitely. At 7:30 p.m., I drove to the Grandview Hotel, the same place where this whole nightmare had started. Jennifer was waiting in the lobby, looking as nervous as I felt. Any ideas? She asked. One, but you're not going to like it. I'm listening. We record him too, get him to admit that he was actually having an affair with Sandra, that our evidence was real. Turn this into a mutual destruction scenario. Jennifer considered this, then nodded slowly. It's risky, but it might work. Do you have a recorder? I pulled out my phone. Voice memo app, not as sophisticated as his equipment, but it should pick up conversation. We took the elevator to the 14th floor, the same floor where Tom had been meeting Sandra for their secret trysts. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tom was waiting in the same corporate suite where I'd first seen evidence of his affair with my wife. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. Jake, Jennifer, thanks for coming. What do you want, Tom? Jennifer asked, her voice cold and professional. What I want is my life back, my marriage, my business, my reputation. Since that's impossible, I'll settle for making sure you both suffer as much as I have. We didn't make you cheat on your wife, I said. We just exposed what you were already doing. Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. Exposed? You orchestrated a campaign of psychological warfare. You destroyed Sandra's career, humiliated her in public, and drove me out of town. That goes way beyond just exposing an affair. So, what's your proposal? Jennifer asked. Tom pulled out his phone and showed us a video file. This is a compilation of all the recordings I made, your planning sessions, your strategy meetings, even some conversations with your sister Jake, where you talked about wanting to make Sandra pay. My heart sank. If Linda was on those recordings too, it would drag my whole family into this mess. I'm going to release this video tomorrow morning unless you both do exactly what I say. Which is? First, Jennifer, you're going to withdraw your divorce filing and take me back. We're going to present a united front, the devoted couple who overcame infidelity through love and forgiveness. Jennifer's face went white. That's not happening. Second, Jake, you're going to publicly apologize to Sandra. Full confession, admitting that you fabricated evidence and orchestrated a campaign of harassment against an innocent woman. She wasn't innocent. Third, you're both going to pay me $50,000 in damages for the harm you've caused to my reputation and business. You're insane, Jennifer said. Maybe, but I'm insane with leverage. Tom held up his phone. 24 hours or this goes viral. That's when I made a decision that surprised even me. Okay, I said, but I want to hear the recordings first. All of them. If I'm going to confess to fabricating evidence, I need to know exactly what you have. Tom smiled triumphantly. Smart man. Always good to know what you're up against. He connected his phone to a small speaker and started playing the recordings. As I listened to my own voice plotting Sandra's downfall, I felt sick. I sounded cold, calculating, cruel. Nothing like the man I thought I was. But then something interesting happened. In his eagerness to prove how much evidence he had against us, Tom started playing recordings from his conversations with Sandra. She deserves everything that's happening to her, Tom's voice said through the speaker. Sandra's weak, just like she was when we were married before. She'll do whatever I tell her to do. Jennifer and I exchanged glances. This was exactly what we needed. Play that part again, I said. What? Why? I want to hear what you really thought about my wife. Tom, still drunk on his perceived power, replayed the section. This time, I was ready with my phone, recording his recordings. You know what the best part is? Tom's recorded voice continued. Sandra actually thinks I'm going to leave Jennifer for her. She has no idea that this is just a game to me. I'm going to string her along until I get bored, then dump her just like I did 6 years ago. I kept my expression neutral, while my phone captured every word. Tom was so focused on his moment of triumph that he didn't notice what I was doing. Interesting, I said. What else do you have? For the next 20 minutes, Tom played recordings that completely contradicted his current narrative. In his own words, he admitted to manipulating Sandra, lying to both our spouses, and viewing the entire affair as a game. When he finally finished, I put my phone away and looked at him calmly. So here's the thing, Tom. I just recorded all of that. His face went from triumphant to confused. What? Your own admissions that you manipulated my wife, that you never intended to leave Jennifer, that the whole affair was just entertainment for you. How do you think that's going to play when it comes out? You can't. Release your recordings if you want, but mine go public too. Let's see whose reputation survives.